Okay. First, my talk focuses on formative assessment. Okay, the last part of the underpinnings of STEM teaching. So I already presented theories, instructions, and then we proceed and cap our discussion with assessment, but focusing on formative assessment, which is also of equal importance with summative assessment. Okay, where I think my colleague, Professor Pelhoni, will be discussing more of this on his talk. Okay, let me share with you this statement of Black, who is well known in assessment, that an assessment activity can help learning if it provides information to be used as feedback by teachers and by their students in assessing themselves and each other to modify the teaching and learning activities in which they are engaged. Why I have to capitalize on formative assessment. In the statement of Black here, there are three major factors that we have to take in, which will be, I hope, part of your takeaways. First is the context of feedback. Feedback, as described here, is a way of interaction, okay, or manifestation of teacher and student interaction. Okay, without this, we cannot say that there is learning. Okay. Now, another key point here is that the inclusion of both teachers and students. We have to recognize that in doing formative assessment or assessment in general, okay, we are participants of the teaching and learning discourse, have to realize that we are learning from each other. Okay, we are learning how the students are learning. Students are learning what they intended to learn. Okay, and the last part is on the context of modification. Okay, it's a way of giving us a clear translation of that feedback. If we were able to see what is the decision that we have to do, either to modify or to go on to the next process of our instruction. Okay. Because formative assessment is our way to help our students, is our main way of gauging our students on how we are going to extend help in order for them to finish the race of learning. For example, in most cases, we employ formative assessment in our daily instruction. The daily quizzes are part of our formative assessment. The way we ask our students if they are learning or not, or if they are engaging to us, is a form of formative assessment and a direct way of getting feedback. And why it is essential? Because it's like a race. And in each race, there are certain segments. And at the end, which is our learning, of the end terminal of our learning, okay, there are subsections that we try to unpack this learning standard into learning objectives. And if we have not come up with a proper decision based on the results of formative assessment or the feedback of our instruction, then how can we help our students to attain the different segments until such time that they will be attaining our terminal learning objective? That's why formative assessment is really important. Though it is not graded, but it is recorded, because these records will show us a way on how we will be modifying our instruction. A good example of this is the practice of Miss Ongkiko. Okay, when more or less they are trying to get the proficiency of the students' assessment results every day, because in that sense it will give her a good reflection on what are the items that students learned, what are the students have learned already, and what should I do for the next session. Okay, there are different ways on how to get an immediate feedback. Okay, and there are different assessment strategies that my colleagues will be discussing eventually. Now, another key concepts of doing formative assessment is the context of constructive alignment. Okay, that the learning outcomes should be related or aligned with the teaching and learning activities that we will be providing to our students, where these teaching learning activities should be aligned with our assessment. And the assessment, again, should be aligned to the learning outcomes. Bakit ko po ito gustong i-emphasize? Because it has been a common observation among with some of our colleagues. Lagi natin pong pinapacheck ito, ang ating lesson plan sa ating mga heads, sa ating mga department heads. But there are cases that it appears that our assessment is not really the assessment needed for that particular learning objectives. That's why one good construct of an effective science teacher is on the knowledge of the assessment. Okay? Under again ang PCK, meron tinatawag tayong teacher's knowledge on assessment, where it gave us a good reflection how teachers identified the essential items needed to be assessed and what are the essential assessment tools aligned to the intended learning objectives that we set on our instruction. Then in that case, we see that there should be that kind of constructive alignment between these three key essentials among the 5 stages of the pedagogical model. Okay, so again, let me emphasize that these are important. Again, as I mentioned at the very beginning, these are, or you have already practicing this, but we wanted to emphasize because eventually this will also influence the way that we will develop, the way that you will be developing your lecture videos, the way that you will be developing your modules. Okay, now, why formative assessment is important? Because there are different formative assessment strategies that we are employing or practicing in our classroom setting. For example, feedback in oral form, feedback in dialogue form, promoting confidence to our students. We also employ peer assessment. We also use effective group work where they have to provide learning. We provided them learning sheets. And then we come up with formative use of summative assessment. And these are the implications of these formative assessment practices to our students. Because formative assessment, as presented by Black, are essential so that it will help our students to be effective learners. Okay, let me emphasize, for example, the three of these assessment practices. Why do we have to request our students to respond orally? Okay, because it will help us, our students, to be engaged in the discussion. Kailangan pa-involve sila sa classroom natin. Kailangan marinig natin kung paano sila nagre-reason out. Why we needed to give also importance to them. Kailangan natin ma-embrace sa kanila that we do care to their learning. And one way of showing it is by requesting them to answer, to respond. Kaya kahit nasa online setting na hindi masyado sila nagpa-participate, alam natin yan, there are studies proving that we have to employ that kind of assessment practice. Okay? Kasi baka ang inaantay lang din nila ay tawagin sila. At ang kinakailangan lang din ay mabigyan sila ng opportunity. Diba? It's their time to shine. Ika nga natin. Okay? Now, why do we have to provide group works? Okay? Because this first it enhances peer assessment. Yun yung nagiging scaffold ni peer assessment activities natin. But it also promotes self-regulation. Okay? Remember when remember the term I used earlier when we are requesting our students to collaborate. It's always resolution. And coming up with resolution is a way of promoting self-regulation to our students because they are trying to get engaged with one another, coming up with a common, an agreeable statement that these items are the things that they will be presenting and explaining. So in that sense, we are contributing to the learning and not learning of themselves, but of the group itself. Okay. And last is on the formative use of summative assessment because it's a good way for our students to help them appreciate the value of their overall review of their work. Okay. Bakit kailangan natin itong malaman yung proficiency nila, ilan yung tumama sa ganito, at bakit sa tingin nila sila nagkamali sa mga items na to? Because in that sense, we are providing them avenue to learn why they made a mistake and why they have to correct their understanding about this matter. Siguro ito yung iba sa mga assessment practices na ginagawa na natin, but we have to reinforce more because it also gave a good psychological feedback on our students' learning. Okay, so with that, let me end my statement, my discussion with this. What features of your science and mathematics teaching you will reinvent in order to enhance the learning of our students?